Today we're talking about business bank account opening in Malta. Now, while Malta used to be a decent banking hub that was easy to access for foreign and offshore companies, those days are gone. Today, it's hard enough for Maltese residents to open a Malta business bank account, let alone a non-resident. The fact is, business banking in Malta, it's changed. And in order to open accounts these days, you need to know the right information going in, know which banks will realistically accept you, what their unspoken requirements or sensitivities are, and which bankers to approach. So, in this video, we're going to break down the options for opening a Malta business bank account. We'll also explain why certain businesses might be better off banking elsewhere. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started with a business bank account opening in Malta, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So, don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, why is it so hard to open a Malta business bank account? Well, like many international financial centers, Malta's financial sector has taken reputational hits and been forced to undergo serious de-risking measures in recent years. More specifically, Maltese banks have been forced to de-risk their operations, which means terminating accounts of existing customers when they fall outside the bank's accepted risk parameters. This was the fallout from a number of high-profile banking blunders. Malta's banking sector has had to rapidly evolve in order to meet the demands of international regulators, correspondent banks, and foreign governments. It's the same thing we've seen in other offshore jurisdictions such as Panama, Cyprus, and Andorra. Of course, in addition to terminating current customers, Maltese banks also changed the rules for new customers, especially non-residents, Maltese companies operating outside of Malta, and foreign companies. Suddenly, the account opening process became slower and way more bureaucratic. Additionally, it's made opening a Malta business bank account nearly impossible for many companies and entrepreneurs. More specifically, companies with limited ties to Malta that can't meet economic substance requirements will struggle to open bank accounts in Malta. In fact, many Maltese companies doing business internationally have found it's sometimes easier just to bank elsewhere. Newly minted Maltese residents are often shocked when they discover that they can't open a Malta business bank account for their new Maltese company because they don't have a sufficient economic substance or a large enough business. So you might be wondering, where are all the business bankers in Malta? And this is another quirk to the Malta business banking that's rarely talked about. And that is, it's tough to find or even contact a good business banker. Bank communication in Malta can be spotty and inconsistent, and you'll often find yourself exchanging emails with an administrative rep, not an actual business banker. And if you're lucky enough to stumble upon a business banker, well, they'll often just tell you to physically come into the branch anyway. But that's not helpful if you're not in Malta and still need specific answers because you're preparing your application. The point is, if you don't have a plan on physically walking into a branch that happens to have an experienced banker, the account opening process can feel overwhelming and unclear. And unfortunately, if a banker or administrative rep gives you inaccurate information, it can add weeks or even months to the account opening process. So, with all that being said, what if you can't get in touch with a banker? Well, many prospective banking clients find it impossible to contact or even find a responsive banker in Malta at certain banks. If you've experienced this firsthand, don't worry, it's not you. Finding a bank with a business banking division that's willing to onboard a new Maltese company with limited economic substance or low annual turnover is a challenge. While there are normal business banks available on the island, there are other banks that are merely booking centers that can confuse prospective clients. These are Maltese banks that simply book transactions through Malta, often for corporate structuring and tax minimization purposes. And these booking centers have limited or no operations on the island. In other words, the sole purpose of some Maltese banks is to increase the efficiency of the bank's operations elsewhere. Recently, journalists started giving banks and booking centers evil-sounding names like shadow banks. But in reality, this is just basic corporate structuring and tax planning. Taxes are lower in Malta than other EU member states, so banks book a portion of their business through here. As a result, these banks have zero interest in banking Maltese companies or individuals. And not surprisingly, the banks that operate booking centers in Malta and in similar countries tend to be large international banks, the kind that you might have accounts with in other countries. And while it might seem logical to open an account with an international bank that you have accounts with elsewhere, this might not be an option. That's why knowing which banks and bankers to approach for your business is critical. Otherwise, you risk wasting your time and money chasing ghost banks that literally have zero interest in banking you or anybody else. What are the types of businesses that want a Malta business bank account? Well, there are 3 types of businesses that can benefit from banking in Malta. Knowing which category your business falls into is key, as this will determine which strategies and banks are available to you. It also dictates your paperwork and documentation requirements for account opening. With that being said, let's look at opening a Malta business bank account for a Malta onshore business. Malta onshore businesses are registered in Malta with local operations, employees or contractors, local representatives, and a physical presence. In other words, the company has genuine operations in Malta. If your business falls into this category, you'll have a wider range of banking options available in Malta than the following categories. Open a Malta business bank account for a Malta offshore business. Malta offshore businesses are companies registered in Malta that do not have any physical presence or local operations. They might have a local director and even a local manager who is a Maltese resident, but they do not have any economic substance or operational presence on the island. This is an important distinction and will determine what banking options are available to your business. In other words, we're only considering foreign and offshore companies that want to open Malta business bank accounts for non-resident businesses. You might be asking yourself, which business do you have? Well, if you're interested in opening a Malta business bank account for a local Maltese company with clear ties to the island, well, you shouldn't have a problem opening an account. That said, if you have a company, Maltese or foreign, that does business outside of Malta and has no economic substance in Malta, things become a little bit more difficult. Likewise, if you need to open accounts remotely, you may run into problems. If you fall into either of these categories, feel free to contact our team for suggestions on which banks to approach. Fortunately, it's still possible for these companies to open accounts, though it may not be in Malta. For those determined to bank in Malta, let's take a look at how to open a Malta business bank account for foreign companies and Maltese registered companies doing business outside of Malta. When it comes to opening a Malta business bank account, many people are surprised to find out that the majority of the due diligence is focused on the ultimate beneficial owner, UBO, economic substance of the business, and proof of business. With regard to the UBO, the bank wants to know who owns and controls the business. This usually includes anyone with a 10% ownership stake or more. Of course, your company will also have to pass due diligence. And if your company doesn't have enough economic substance in Malta, you can be expected to jump through a lot of additional hoops. Now, these hoops can include additional bank reference letters, commercial reference letters, sources of funds, customer contracts, supplier agreements, and a whole lot more. Of course, requirements vary from bank to bank, and some bankers may be more lenient. However, if your business is considered high risk, which many offshore businesses are, you can expect to pay up to £1,000 in upfront due diligence fees. And that doesn't even guarantee that your Malta business bank account will be opened. At some banks, this is just a non-refundable cost of being considered for an account in the application stage. Now, while the focus of this video is Malta business bank accounts, it's important to ask yourself whether Malta is actually the best place for your business to bank. Given the increasing restrictions, aggressive de-risking campaigns, aversion to offshore and international businesses, and general difficulty of opening a Malta business bank account, there may be better banking options elsewhere. In fact, depending on your industries, business activities, where the company has economic ties, and the individuals involved, you might be able to access significantly better banking hubs with less hassle. So what should you do instead? Well, if you already have a Malta business and need to open a bank account, there are international banking options available. With the right knowledge on which specific banks and bankers to contact, you can open a bank account without paying extortionate fees. We explain exactly how to do this, provide detailed account opening strategies, recommend specific banks, and more in our recent report, How to Open International Bank Accounts for Offshore Companies, which is available to our GlobalBanks insiders. This report includes actionable strategies, specific tips and suggestions, and banks that cater to the needs of offshore companies registered in jurisdictions like Malta. So, if you feel like you're ready to open a Malta business bank account, by all means use this video to guide your decision making. You can also read more about Maltese banking and account opening on our website, globalbanks.com. But if you want to know which specific banks will realistically accept your company, which account opening strategies to use, how to avoid pitfalls, overcome tough paperwork requirements, and more, then all you have to do is join our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports, access to the GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50 plus countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. Finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts, ready to answer your most pressing banking questions and to make suggestions on which strategies to use when opening business bank accounts in Malta and elsewhere to help best meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.